Welcome everyone to today's webinar. So Cenk, thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you. So Cenk is the founder of Kondukto and CEO of Kondukto. So today we are going to talk about a risk-based approach for achieving harmony in scaling your security program. So I know it's a bit broad. We have detailed outline, so we will talk about specifics. But before we start, I would like to give the floor to Cenk, so he can introduce himself and we can get to know Kondukto a bit better.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Serhat. So I'm also very excited to discuss those application security issues with you as well. So let me give you a quick introduction about me and the Kondukto. My name is Cenk Kalpakoglu. I'm the technical founder and CEO at Kondukto. We are an application security orchestration posture management platform. What we do is that actually, just like today's talk, we try to create or try to help organizations in security posture with automation orchestration capabilities. And personally, I have a developer background, then turned to AppSec, offensive security part, and I've been doing cybersecurity a little bit over 15 years.
Okay, thank you very much for the brief introduction, Cenk. So usually our webinars, our audience are technical, but I usually, at least want to talk a little bit about the fundamentals, because when we talk about application security, when we talk about noise, those things are familiar, but also there are different descriptions. So I'd like to just briefly, can you explain what application security is, what it involves? And sure. Then maybe talk a little bit about the noise part.
Yeah. So right now we are living DevOps-driven development world. What I mean is that the release cycles are extremely short. And after the microservice transition, which is still people discussing those, the attack surface increased heavily. And this increase in attack surface also increased number of found vulnerabilities on single application or each applications. So that's why creating an application security program is more difficult than it was 5 years ago. Right now, in order to achieve a security posture management or security program, companies tend to use multiple solutions. Actually, 60% of the companies, they use more than 7 solutions, which is quite high in terms of cybersecurity domain. So that's why in each stage of the development, companies are using different or slightly different solutions. So this is the main problem, that the noise is there in this security space. Mm-hmm. And the other problem in the application security program is that we have a people problem. We have tools problem, just like I explained, but we have a people problem, resource problem as well, because right now the word ratio is that for 100 developers, we have just 1 application security engineers or product security engineers, which create a bottleneck in this SDLC processes. And the noise actually are those bottlenecks, which could be tools, results, people, communication, and everything. So this is the main topic that basically try to solve.
Yep. Thanks, Cenk. So just going off topic a little bit, but I used to work at Opsgenie, and I was a founding engineer, and Atlassian acquired Opsgenie. So basically what we were doing was very similar, but it was for DevOps world, for integrating monitoring tools. But that is very interesting what you said. On average, there are 7 different security solutions in a company. That is a quite high number. And I know Gartner and many other, kind of analyst firm, they keep talking about consolidation. Everyone wants to, do everything. But from my experience is, even if you could reduce that number, there will be still a lot of noise that needs to be reduced with, great automation. And on top of that, also from my experience, not every company wants to reduce that number, because each tool has its own strengths, and those tools actually even if someone tries to do everything, probably they will miss some important bits. And especially for enterprises, as companies get bigger, those problems needs to be taken care of well. So that is important. So I definitely understand the value, and the noise problem as well. I mean, those teams are very small, as you said. So they get hundreds of dollars every day. I mean, how could they prioritize? Right.
Actually, the main problem is that you need to have correct metrics. Actually, even if you have the right metrics, you need to allocate right resources. You need to have smart decisions to manage all those processes. Because just like you said, if you are dealing with hundreds of vulnerabilities each month, and if you can only manage less than 10% of those vulnerabilities, this means that you will have 90% of those vulnerabilities will be actually be a backlog on your system. And this creates a huge number and a huge problem. And that's why lots of companies are dealing more than 100,000 vulnerabilities of backlog on their system, which is at some point it is going to be incredible to deal with, or they just spam the developers, which will create friction between developers and security engineers. And again, it's part of noise or communication issues, just like we discussed.
Yep. And then, those negative impacts on not just, I can imagine security teams, won't be able to do anything else, just looking at vulnerabilities, trying to solve at least a few of them every month. And there are still a bunch of them just sitting there, and they don't know how to prioritize. I mean, they accept that they won't be able to solve everything. That is okay, but they even have a hard time prioritizing those. So you mentioned the negative, some of the negative impacts on this noise on scalability and efficiency. Can you explain more? Because what you said was very interesting to me, because it just doesn't really only affect the security team, but it also affects the company overall. If they cannot manage these vulnerabilities, they start, paging actual, employees out of nowhere. So,
Yeah. So, so let me start from here. So if we have an application security program, and if we cannot deal the communication issues as we discussed, this is going to create not just one, but a couple of different problems in different ways. So that's why having those informations actually could help us to identify the relevant bottlenecks. That's why actually having noise is a good thing in some ways. What I mean is that once you have the data, you can actually pinpoint your effort, and you can try to solve those bottlenecks, which could be in different ways. Some companies might have issues on the triage phase. The other one could be in the vulnerability management part, etc. So this goes on. So that's why I think the communications or the noise problems come vary in a few different ways. But for us, from an application security perspective, the main problem is scalability. Because again, the main issue in this process is we have 100 developers. On the other hand, we have just one application security engineer, and without having a certain level of automation, it is actually impossible for a security team to answer those requests, which usually creates, again, friction. Up to now, or up to later years, up to the DevSecOps term, the process was like that. Developers were usually developing tools. They were sending the security teams, and security teams scanning the vulnerabilities. They were checking for the loopholes, etc. for a couple of days, maybe a week or so, maybe even more. Then they were giving yes or green light to their team to release the product. But after the DevOps transition, the cycle actually it's a couple of minutes, not even hours. So that's why we need to put the security testing tools into the development life cycle itself. Since you're coming from DevOps background, this is quite problematic because you have many stakeholders, and in order to manage those problems or communication issues between those stakeholders, we have to have a processes first. If I understand your question correctly, one of the main problems actually comes from the communication processes issues. And after having those processes, then actually we can try to eliminate the noise one by one. But again, once you are dealing hundreds of vulnerabilities, it's not easy for sure.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Cenk. I mean, so you mentioned like at any point in time, there will be at least like hundreds of different vulnerabilities. So what are the, best ways to deal with this kind of complexity, this kind of, crowd?
This is a great question. I will give you my personal opinion because each team may have different approach to this problem, but I actually like I like to identify the key metrics first. What I mean is that for some organizations, according to your business context, you may have different requirements. And starting small and then increasing the scope, usually best working way. So that's why my personal opinion is to start small, identifying the correct metrics or key vulnerabilities. Once we were able to deal that specific context, then we can increase the scope. And as we increase the scope, we can try to eliminate noise in a better, in a more effective way. And usually I like to start with the secret scans. Once we deal with the secrets, because again, this is the low-hanging fruit. And secrets also makes more sense from a developer perspective. It's usually the best working way I have seen on my professional life.
Okay, thank you, Cenk. So there's also this thing called risk-based approach, right? So I'd like to dig deeper into that because prioritization is one of the biggest problems. And obviously you can try to kind of automate some stuff, auto-remediate, some low-hanging fruits, as you mentioned, but there's always a manual effort. So and the biggest problem, and one of the hot topics in security nowadays, is basically giving less things to worry about. Just show me the most important stuff first, most risky stuff, so I could just fix them, and that will probably help me be much secure, with just a kind of minimum level of effort. Because we only have like a couple of people in our security team, and we have limited time, limited resources. So how do I prioritize? So could you talk more about this, risk-based approach?
Sure. And first, let me add this. Organizations, they don't really care about vulnerabilities. They care about risks. So that's why if you don't show the risk properly to the organizations or to the relevant stakeholders, then you may lose the context from their eyes. So what we need to do is that in order to prioritize some vulnerabilities, some relevant vulnerabilities, is to add more context. Again, we are using data or noise to find the common patterns. And by adding additional context, not necessarily security context, you can add other dev metrics or other company metrics to those contexts in order to understand which applications are more crucial. Maybe they are open to the internet, maybe they are internal application. And once you identify those assets, then you can actually put a contextualized meaning or risk-based approach to each vulnerabilities. So that's why adding additional context to each vulnerability or in each application will definitely help you to provide more fine-tuned processes around those vulnerability management. Easiest way to do that using open source component. For example, right now, lots of security companies or even organizations, they share commonly find vulnerabilities or known exploit vulnerabilities publicly. And using those contexts can give us a certain level of prioritization. And just by using those prioritization, we can minimize the effort, or at least we can know where to start in these processes. So from that perspective, risk-based approach is actually adding additional context to understand which application or which vulnerabilities could be more crucial or more harmful for our organization. This is what we mean, basically.
Okay. That's super helpful. I mean, can you also mention, a little bit more about the value? I mean, the value of this risk prioritization.
Yeah.
That is important because you said, I mean, at least you have the data, and then the first thing is they don't care about those data by itself. They care about the risks. If they know that there are things that could be potentially dangerous for the company because of this and that, then they will care more about security, invest in it. And that is usually a big challenge for security teams. Like they have a hard time showing their value in companies, if especially the leadership team doesn't prioritize security. So they need to clearly communicate risk. But also, I mean, I want to learn more about this. How this, not just the leadership team, but how this affects overall the security program in the company.
Yeah, this is a great question. So again, if you try to deal noise, what we try to understand that from a security engineering perspective, we are not going to triage all the vulnerabilities, and we don't need to do that as well, because someone in the security context, having false positives is way better than having false negatives, for sure, because you don't want to miss anything. That's why tools tend to create lots of false positive data. And this creates, again, even more noise from that context. That's why we know that we don't need to solve all vulnerabilities in the system. But the main problem is that how should we know which vulnerabilities makes more sense? And again, using additional context may help us to do that. So let me give you an example. Let's say we have dozens of microservices and applications. And if we know which applications are actually have external attack surface, then we can prioritize our effort to solve those vulnerabilities first. Because if we have two application, one is open to internet and the other one is an internal application, even if they have the same risk values or same vulnerability numbers, the risk values will be different, because one is more open to external attacks. On the other end, the other one is way behind in the internal technology stack. So that's why actually our prioritization is very crucial, to prioritize the effort, not to prioritize the vulnerabilities, or it does not show us which vulnerabilities is more important. It shows us that which vulnerabilities or which applications have higher risk than the other ones, and this is how we usually set up our application security program. And again, not security tools can provide us. Sometimes having additional development tools, metrics, data look-like platforms could also be helpful to understand which tools are more important, crucial, or have higher business risks than the other ones. So this is the main problem in this game.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, relevant to that, can you talk about let's say we found out about these vulnerabilities, these tools that have some potential vulnerabilities, and then we do risk prioritization. kind of assessment. You already mentioned this a little bit, but can you explain the process? Like, I mean, for example, in your, Kondukto, like, how do you help with this? Because I think that will, help the audience understand better in a real world. Like, how does this work?
Great question. Thank you. So at Kondukto, what we try to do is that we try to start this journey from the repository, because again, we identified all the application assets, and by starting this journey from the repository information, which could be the last commit date as well, we try to map these application journey up to the production. And recently we added the production level information into this picture. So what we do is that once we identify the vulnerabilities, we normalize the data. And while normalizing data, we try to identify common patterns. Because as we discussed previously, companies tend to use multiple solutions. Sometimes those solutions could be commercial solutions. And recently, we have seen lots of adoption in the open source security solutions as well. So finding those common patterns is also a way of reducing noise, because we can deduplicate common or same vulnerabilities. And as we deduplicate or normalize those vulnerabilities, we try to add threat intelligence data in this picture. So let's say a container have a vulnerability. We backtrace this vulnerability with a threat intelligence platform to understand if this vulnerability has a higher impact than the other one, or maybe is there any available exploit in the market or in the world. And if we find that those, we automatically alarm the relevant teams, the product security engineer, maybe developers, or just the security team, to make them understand that these applications might be more vulnerable to those certain type of attacks. And since right now we have the cloud security posture management information as well, again, we can normalize those data to add additional context, or to make aware people that those applications might have higher risk. Those could be related to the secret information, because usually some security tools tells us that if this cluster has a secrets encrypted or not, maybe is publicly available or not, etc. So having additional data and increasing the value of those contexts, what we try to do. And this is very, very short explanation what we try to achieve on Kondukto here.
Okay, I mean, thank you very much. Actually, this was super, super helpful, because especially the connection with, like, making it more, getting contextual data from, like, threat intelligence tools and combining those, really, I mean, those two very relevant data together will actually, help us, help the teams, security teams understand the actual impact of those potential vulnerabilities. And at the end of the day, that is what matters, right? I mean, any tool can identify anything, but unless, the team that needs to solve those issues understands it better, so they could prioritize which ones they need to solve, and even like how they should start solving those is really hard. And you guys, have solved this problem with all these risk-based assessment and, prioritization processes. So you mentioned, you also have nowadays, like, cloud security posture management, data, and nowadays, obviously, everyone, I don't need to say, but everyone is at least have some sort of, cloud presence. So, those vulnerabilities may live on cloud, but again, like, if let's say you are running it on, like, EC2 on AWS versus, or let's say virtual machine, or versus a container, obviously the vulnerabilities will differ, and maybe how you approach, how you remediate these issues, these potential vulnerabilities will differ. So my question is, because you mentioned cloud, and I know you guys also offer, on-prem solution as well in your product, how does it differ? Like, you've seen, your customers are both, some of them using on-prem, solutions, security tools. Some of them are using cloud-based, solutions. Is there any difference between, like, how you guys do the risk prioritization?
This is actually a hard question because the answer is yes and no. And according to the customer presence, maybe domain, maybe the size, this could differ as well. However, what I've seen is that everyone is using cloud nowadays. Some companies, even though we provide an on-prem solution, this is usually their premise or their private cloud, not their data center, etc. And some companies, they need to use multiple clouds for some reason, for some security measures, etc. And how it differs is that usually a relatively old school companies usually have less cloud presence. But if we are dealing with a newish or slightly new company, then we are usually speaking with cloud native or multi-cloud environments as well. And the security stack or security approach of those vulnerabilities is actually quite similar, because old school companies, they have security solutions, and actually those security solutions, not primitive but early days or parent versions of cloud security tools. So what I would say is that actually right now the cloud security tools are just cloud native ways of doing old school infrastructure security scanning tools. So that from that perspective, for us, it doesn't really matter, but I understand, or we can see the slight difference between those environments. But I can easily tell you that usually asset discovery or having those assets and relevant people is a bigger issue on old school organizations. On the other hand, if a company is using cloud environment with all new approaches, everything is way easier than the old school companies.
Yep. What we just additional context. So we do, SaaS security at Resmo, and what we have seen is nowadays, not just companies are not just using cloud. They use, on average, like even if they have like 50 employees, they use about 100 different SaaS tools. So the problem with it is, I mean, every cloud provider also, like they have their own kind of, at least a way of seeing all the assets in one place. Even if it's a simple way of seeing this, there is one. So what you said is, if you are talking about a single cloud provider, again, it is much easier compared to on-prem. But overall, even for modern companies, the attack surface expansion just goes beyond just your repositories, your whatever your most critical assets as you think so, because nowadays, like those SaaS tools, they do contain as critical data as, at least I mean those you have on your on-prem. Like if there is a vulnerability, if someone get access to those SaaS applications, there's a big potential risk, especially for tools that are relevant to development. Even if we are talking about marketing and sales tools, then there is this critical data, and data exposure is another issue that is also closely tied to compliance, which could potentially comes with additional
I mean, I think SaaS security is the problem for all size of companies, regardless the size is an issue. As you increase the size or increase the maturity, this problem is still there. So from that perspective, I totally agree with you. And as companies tend to use more SaaS-based solutions, I think the problem or the problem around those SaaS tooling will be always there and will increase. That's why people tend to use the Okta-like IAM tools in order to manage all the access from those tooling. But the problem, the pain is there still.
Yep, exactly. And what we see is, like you mentioned, Okta, like almost every one of our customers they have some sort of identity and access management solution, and it just doesn't cover it. I mean, you cannot just tie everything via SAML. You cannot just, many companies don't even know which tools their, employees are using. There is no way to ensure that, they don't share a password, they don't, across different SaaS tools, or there's no way of knowing that, a couple of people just buy a single account and reuse it. So these are really hard questions that are not traditional, like vulnerability management type of questions, but even like those, problems like a weak password, like a reuse password, or, an account used by multiple people in the company sound simple, or two-factor authentication, whatever it is. These type of security issues actually cause bigger problems, from a security perspective in many cases. They are simple, but they are also easier to hack. Like for hackers, they are low-hanging fruits. So, the problem, one of the biggest problems that I see in today's, security is that employees, like you put roadblocks, like, I mean, they need to change a password every 3 months, but it has to be, it has to include all these, 5 different rules. So they will just forget about it, and eventually they will just write that password like on a paper and just look at it every time they log in. I mean, if you don't provide the best possible experience from a security perspective, if you don't make their job easier, it's just never going to happen. It's just going to get worse. So what you mentioned is actually at the beginning of our call is very valuable to me. Like, you want to distribute this, vulnerability loads to the actual people, like who will solve these problems. But if you do it blindly, if you do send everything to them, they will just ignore them. Like, you need to add additional context, you need to prioritize, and also, help them solve these issues proactively. So
and you need, and sorry for
of course.
And one of the aspect is that you need to find the correct stakeholder, right stakeholders.
Exactly.
This is also a problem on particularly big enterprises. That's why companies are using CMDBs, change management platforms, to identify which source is actually, who's the owner of that relevant asset or relevant source. Again, finding relevant people, correct teams is always an issue in that context.
Exactly. Like, just to give you, I don't want to talk about Resmi a lot, but just to give you an example, that is one of the things that we try to solve. Like, every app that we identify, we discover has an owner, and you can automate this. Like, if the category of the app is this, assign this app to this team or to this individual. And you can, for example, like the problem then is like, how do we sync those teams? There's a new people, right? So our approach is we do sync those with Google Groups or Azure AD, groups. And if you kind of the team at least like keeps track of teams in a tool that they could integrate with Resmo, we sync those together so we could like automate this stuff. So what you said is very relevant to us as well, and resonates with me a lot. So before we close, like, I'd like to give you the stage. I mean, like, if you want to add more to the conversation, if you want to add additional at least conclusion, then we will finalize the conversation.
Yeah. So what I can tell you that I think the cybersecurity is then cat and dog game. As the technology evolves, which constantly is, the new attack surfaces, new attack mechanisms are always popping up. And from a security perspective, we are trying to defend those bases. That's why we are expecting to have even more security solutions, not particularly in the AppSec domain, but in general cybersecurity domain itself. So what I would say is that having a single pane of glass will be always valuable from a security engineering perspective, which is I think what we try to do, and this is the way that new security approach will be in the very near future.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much for all these great insights. And that also, I mean, this helped me understand the value of Kondukto much better. I understood, like, at least what you are trying to do, but also the examples around, like, incorporating data from threat intelligence and, with vulnerabilities and, identifying the key stakeholders and helping them solve these problems was really valuable to me, and also resonates with me a lot. So thank you very much for joining me today. Again, also, can you just briefly mention, like, if someone wants to reach out to you or get a demo of Kondukto, how should they reach out?
First of all, you can always reach out to me directly. My email is cenk@kondukto.io. And if you go to our webpage, the platform demo is available, and you can always reach out to us for any kind of demo purposes, or even if you have a question, just shoot an email. We will definitely get back to you.
Thank you very much, Cenk. Again, have a great day.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.